Hey guys, welcome back to more Entitled People property drama stories. In this video, a corrupt businessman built a warehouse on my private property without my permission because he thought I am dead. Let's dive right into the story. So I would consider myself a bit of an introverted type of guy. Some people might call me a recluse or a hermit, but it all really boils down to one thing. I am the type of person that enjoys being alone and does not have many friends or enjoys being in the company of others that much. I just want to say that I don't hate people or anything, I just like it better when I am on my own. When I was in my 20s, I made some really smart investments and it meant that I was able to afford a really nice and big plot of land here in Pakistan. Some people thought I should use the money to move out more west, but I like it here, and with the money I had, I could live comfortably for the rest of my life, living on interest and some long-term investments I have going. I'm 34 right now and I spent my life just enjoying myself and living a life that I know most people would call luxurious or even frivolous. Despite my enjoyment for being alone and having my privacy, I don't actually like staying at home all the time. I go on a lot of trips and see the world and the amazing things it has to offer. I've seen cultures and eaten food I never knew existed beforehand. Anyway, I'm usually gone for months at a time, and when I get back and usually end up seeing people again, I hear rumors that go around. Despite me being on trips, people are always gossiping that something has happened to me. Either that I had fallen ill and have been in the hospital, that I had passed away, moved away, or my personal favorite were the rumors that I was in prison. I think part of being mainly on my own is that some people think I'm creepy, so the rumors can get intense. I don't really mind them, since I know that living off grid is not the normal thing for people to do. Most people interact more with society, get married and have some kids. My life just never really panned out this way, and nothing bothered me until I took one trip and came back to a complete disaster. This was one of my longer trips and I was gone for about a year in total, since I was just enjoying myself and was not caring or paying attention to the passage of time. I came home and saw that there's this huge building on my property. Most of my land was not developed and I wanted it that way, so I had no idea what was built there, and I knew for a fact that I didn't pay for it to go up. I walked around the building, which was closed, and looked through a window to see that it was some kind of warehouse. Boxes stacked up for storage and even a forklift inside of it to move things around. I was angry and needed to get to the bottom of whatever was happening here. I went into town and of course heard the whispers of people, amazed that I once again showed my face. I tried to ignore most of them and walked into the main store I go to because I know the owner fairly well. He is the closest thing I would call a friend. I asked him if he heard anything about the warehouse being built on my property, and he told me that some new businessman was talking about the fact that he built a warehouse for his growing logistics company, but did not know that it was built on my land. I got the information of the owner, but it was getting late, and when I called him, I got no answer. I went back home and was awoken at 2 in the morning from the sounds of trucks coming onto my property in order to drop off and pick up things from the warehouse. I was furious, and I knew that unless I took care of this thing, I was not gonna get any peace on my own property again. I decided against calling again in the morning and instead looked up where his office was and just drove to it. At first they did not want to let me in, but I told them I would come back with the police if they did not get me in with this businessman right then and there. It worked and I came face to face with him. He even looked like a sleazy kind of guy. Me, why did you build your warehouse on my private property? Just FYI, I own that land and I want you and the warehouse gone now. Man, I see you waste no time getting to the point of things. To be honest, when I heard you were here, I was surprised. I believed that you were dead since the house has not been touched on in a year. Me, well, I'm alive and I want my peace and quiet back. Man, the property was abandoned, so I have squatter rights to it. I'm not moving my warehouse, but I will tell you what I can do. For all the trouble you went through, I can offer you some money as compensation. He offered me a small amount of money. It translated to about $500 or 500 euros or something like that, if that's your currency. Basically nothing, and it insulted me more than if he offered me nothing. He wanted to bully me right out of my own land. I was not gonna have it, and I was not gonna buy his story of squatter rights either. I'm allowed to travel and not have my land stolen based on some rumor that I had died. I got a lawyer and told him that I wanted a full investigation done on how he managed to even build the thing without getting told by the town to stop it. If he claimed it was because I had died, he would have had to prove my death for them to allow him to do this. My guess was that he built it just illegally, but actually I was only half right about that. We were able to get a court order to gain access to the paperwork that he used in order to build the warehouse, and I could see that the documents had a ton of wrong information about me and claiming that he had familial connections to me that somehow made him my next of kin. No death certificate was filed either. I found this out way later, but he ended up using his money and power to bribe officials into pushing the paperwork along anyway to allow the building to start. I don't know about other countries, but here in Pakistan, if you have a lot of money, then it can be too easy to bribe people in positions of power. City employees and police don't make too much money, so they are happy to take from rich people that want to bend the rules. Once people are caught doing the bribery though, they can get into some serious trouble for it. Anyway, during this entire thing the trucks kept coming and I was being disrupted constantly when I just wanted to relax in my home. The businessman was also angry and decided that he was going to get a little bit more aggressive than his laid-back attitude in his office. He threatened to take me to court for harassing him, and when he was done, I would not have any money left according to him. He said he would badmouth me to the community, which to me was a little bit funny. I did not care about my reputation with people since I keep to myself anyway, and because of those threats though, I decided to get some revenge and make it so he was the one getting a bad reputation by the community. I went to the news and told them about the town usually being quiet and easy to get anywhere no matter the time of day, how clean the air was and things were quiet and peaceful. So basically nobody was trying to use money to take over the entire town before he came around, and since he built his warehouse and expanded his company, the roads were now filled with trucks causing traffic, since the roads really are not made for trucks that big to make turns. It also causes more dust in the air and noise, and they ran the story and really made it seem like he was trying to turn the town into a factory and ruin the peaceful life. I was thrilled that I got everybody turned against him because of what he was trying to do to me. I might not be active in the community, but I never did anything to hurt it. Getting back on point though, with the lawsuit against him, we were finally able to start going to trial, and the investigation against him was all coming out. The fraud was easy to prove since the documents showed clear lies about me being dead and him inheriting the land. I was standing right there, alive and well, and there was no connection found between the two of us. The court wanted to know how the bad paperwork got through and knew the only way was bribery. The last charge that he got arrested for was actually defamation against me. He had been telling people in town downright lies about how I was evil and tried to attack him, how my land was so private because I was a secret murderer, and that was why I kept disappearing for long periods of time. That I kept either going into hiding or going to jail for what I did. Pretty ironic, since now he was the one facing jail time for everything that he had done. I honestly think that the court telling him that he had to pay me a ton of money and tear down the warehouse was worse news to him than the fact that he was going to jail. His entire business was basically run into the ground since he was not there to run it anymore, and looking it up now would lead to the news articles about him being a horrible person. I also found out months later that they did find out exactly who took the bribes from him and moved the documents forward. I guess since it was a fairly big case, they wanted to make an example out of it, and they got in trouble despite most corrupt officials never getting in trouble here, even if they do get caught for taking bribes. Either way though, I am glad the warehouse is gone and my land is back to being quiet and peaceful. I've taken trips since the whole thing got sorted out, but never for as long as I did that time. I don't know if I'm worried about somebody else taking my land, but for now, at least shorter trips seem to be the right way to do things. And each time I've come home to see it was exactly how I left it. I hope this greedy, entitled, sleazy businessman learned that my land is a bad target because I will always end up coming back and actually have the money to fight back. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I bet if OP was not so loaded money-wise, then this would have ended much differently. It's really heartbreaking to see the levels of corruption in some other countries. Then again, I don't think that Pakistan as a whole is as corrupt as this place where OP lives. Either way, the next one is titled Never Fire Your Best Employee, and it is a very entertaining story from r/malicious compliance. And by the way, if you've enjoyed the story so far, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and post some star emojis in the comments to help me out. So this happened a couple years ago, but I was thinking about it recently. I worked for a company doing their media design, graphic design, photography, live event AV, video editing, marketing, etc. So this company held big events, and over my years at the company I was given more and more unrelated responsibilities until I was doing the jobs of at least 4 people. They also never helped pay for any materials, so all of the necessary media equipment was paid for out of pocket. All of them had my name on them to make sure that it wouldn't get lost if I landed out. Over the years I had accumulated a pretty impressive supply through secondhand purchases and watching for deals. By the time I hit my 5th year, there I had thousands of dollars in high-end equipment that was used for almost every part of the organization's promotion and event production. I think you can see where this is going. So one day I was brought into my boss's office and told that they would be downsizing and had found someone fresh out of college with no real-life experience that will be taking over my jobs as well as a few others. I was completely caught off guard. They then had one of the people from corporate follow me to my office to assist in cleaning out my stuff. He specifically said, "Take everything that is yours, you won't be coming back." So that's what I did. They clearly expected the usual paper box full of some photos and a plan, but instead I had them hauling crate after crate of our media and event supplies to my car. I had a 2004 Ford Explorer at the time, and by the time I left it, it was filled to the brim. With every box that we took out of my car, my boss began to get more and more panicked. At one time he said, "You can only take things that are yours." And through my sadness and anger, I was able to find it in me to kindly tell him that every single thing I was taking was mine and that I kept all receipts if he wanted proof of it. The final nail in the coffin was when I told him that I would need access to the arena's AV booth and the catwalk. I still remember the fear in his eyes. He went and I unplugged all of my cameras that I'd been lending to my events team, all of which were clearly marked with my name. I basically felt like the Grinch, just walking around and taking all the random things in the building that had my name on them. Driving away, I was heartbroken that a company I had given 200% to in every way had picked someone younger and fresh out of college to replace me. But I won't lie, the smugness of watching their face as I stripped the place bare was worth it. Looking back on it, that was the worst and most toxic job I've ever had. The company only lasted another year before they folded entirely, and I like to believe that I had a hand in that. And to think if they had just compensated me fairly and purchased the necessary things themselves instead of forcing me to provide my team with those things, they would not have had to start from scratch. And the next one is titled Missionary Madness. And it is a church drama story, which we have not had in a while, posted by user Voyager7 on r/ripe stories on Reddit. So a friend of mine was once accosted in her own home by a couple of missionaries from some branch of Christianity. Neither she nor I ever knew which one. When she came to the door, they said, "Good morning, ma'am. Do you have a few minutes? We would love to talk to you about the Bible." Well, my friend is an Orthodox Jew. She cannot talk Bible with the best of them, so she smiles and says, "Oh, I love a good Bible discussion. What is your take on the meaning of," and she names some extremely obscure biblical interpretation controversy from within the Orthodox community. She's basically asking them how they would interpret a long phrase in ancient Hebrew. She then rattles off the phrase and looks at them expectantly. "No? Well, what about," and she rattles off another one. After a couple of tries, the missionaries timidly admit that they don't actually know Hebrew, so they cannot really have an opinion on the interpretation of the Hebrew phrases that she's been mentioning. My friend stares at them wearing her best shocked face. Don't know Hebrew? Why on earth not? How can you possibly understand the word of God if you don't even read it in the original? They mumble something about how almost nobody really learns Hebrew these days, it's too much hard language. My friend smiles cheerfully and calls, "Sarah, sweetie, please come to the door and bring the big Tanakh that's on the coffee table." In trots a pretty little girl with 2 long dark braids. She is all of about 5 years old and the big book is almost too much for her to carry, but she holds it super carefully. Her mom takes it and holds it in front of Sarah, asking the child, "Please open it to any page, the first one you find, and read a bit for these gentlemen, won't you?" Brimming with pride at being invited to show off her scholarship, little Sarah opens the Bible and starts reading the Hebrew sentences as simple and easily as you would read an English novel. She's only 5, a lot of kids don't even read too well in one language by that age, but Sarah's Hebrew is as good as her English. She finishes the paragraph and her mother thanks her and sends her back to put the book away. Then she turns to the missionaries and asks, "I'm sorry, what were you saying?" What they said at this point was that they had to be going, that it had been a lovely discussion, but they really had to get on their way, etc. They practically fell over each other to get away from her door. Before they could get to the end of her stairway though, she calls to them and they'll stop and look back. She points to the mezuzah on her door. "Gentlemen, you see this?" And they nod nervously. Well, I think you should know that in pretty much any house that got one of these on the door, you're gonna find somebody like me. It's up up to you whether you consider that a good thing or a bad thing. They nodded and mumbled thanks for the information and then scurried away. My friend checked with her neighbors later, and so far as she could tell, they did not knock on a single other door in her neighborhood, nearly all of which were Jewish homes that wore the mezuzah proudly. And by the way, that word is way too hard to pronounce. She thinks they were just too scared of getting into a biblical argument with a better armed opponent. And by the way, Ripe Stars, let me know if you still enjoy these church drama stories, because we didn't have them in a while and I think I still find them amusing. And the next one is another petty revenge story. Background: about 25 years ago, I registered my last name .com for my personal use. I mostly use it as an email server for my family. Unfortunately, there are many businesses around the world that use my last name, their country code, for their websites and email. As such, I regularly get business mail sent to my server. Most of the time this just bounces, but sometimes they happen to match the name of a user or former user of my mail server. As all of the companies have been polite so far, I routinely forward business-related email to the correct address. Because it doesn't really cost me anything, I have set up personal email addresses for some people I don't actually know who happen to have my last name, as long as they agreed not to use it for spam. Well then, 20 years ago, there was this one guy who happened to have the same first name as my deceased uncle. I was monitoring that address just in case anything important legally or financially came through, to make sure that his family didn't get surprised by anything. The guy who decided to use that for his address had a serious gambling problem. I was getting emails from several gambling sites, often multiple times per day, with transaction records for large, at least from my perspective, deposits. These were all credit card transactions, very often for offshore online casinos, so they did not exactly abide by banking regulations either in the US or his home country. In other words, I often got the full credit card numbers and expiration dates emailed unencrypted. If I'd been dishonest, I could have easily run up thousands of dollars in charges. Because some of these transactions also had his physical address, I did have a way to contact him. So first, by using that, I was able to figure out what his actual personal email address was. I did not want to use his company email because of the nature of what I was sending, so I emailed him and explained the problem and asked him if he was really comfortable with me having access to several of his credit cards. He accused me of being a hacker, called me several names that I shouldn't repeat here, and blew me off because I kept getting the email receipts. At this point, I figured out that he was probably digging himself and his family into a fairly deep financial hole, and while I was annoyed with him for ignoring his problem and being rude, I did not think that his family should pay the price for his bad gambling habit. Because I had his home address, I was able to figure out his wife's name and where she worked. So I printed up a stack of about 20 of the emails, put them into an envelope marked personal and confidential, and dropped them in the mail to her office. A couple of weeks later, the gambling emails stopped, and a few months after that, out of curiosity, I did a search for them again and found the legal notice for their divorce. And the next one is a malicious compliance story. So somewhere around 2007, I was working as a drugstore manager. I was running the entire front store and the pharmacy. Pay was excellent for someone who was in their early to mid-20s, but the job was also soul-crushing in some stupid ways. A rule came down that cashiers can no longer have drinks at the register. They can drink on their lunch breaks and otherwise shouldn't need water. At the same time, they dialed back the AC, so the store was constantly uncomfortably warm, but not technically dangerous. I had some of the best staff. One lady was roughly 65 and came to me to let me know that she was on medicine that gave her dry mouth, so she needed me to know if I took her water away, she would really have a hard time being able to talk to customers. She almost developed a lisp when she couldn't have her water. I told her, no worries, have your water, I will deal with my boss when he sees you someday. Because he was running 40 stores and mine was generally not a problem store, he only came by every 60 days or so. Eventually, he does swing in and ask her about her water. She says I have a medical condition and I told her it was fine. I also told him that I had approved the water. He pulls me into the office to let me know that for her to have that water, she need a doctor's note. If he sees her with it again without a note, we both get written warnings. He explains this is because not following the company rule cannot be a decision made by me. I'm flabbergasted, I'm just a manager in charge of the store. This company literally made me do drills on how to deal with bombs or shootings, but I cannot approve a bottle of water. It must be an exception, deemed necessary for medical needs. I explain this is stupid, he actually agrees but says he's also following orders from above. Great. So I pull my cashier aside and tell her what's up. I then said I'm really sorry, but can she please just get her doctor to fax a stupid note over so we can cover our assets? She got a little gleam in her eye and I was excited to see what it meant. Her next shift she rolls in and says, "You're gonna love this." She hands me about 100 copies of a letter that says something along the lines of, "I do solemnly state that cashier is medically a human being and requires water on regular intervals while working and not solely during breaks. This was a massive waste of time and your company should be ashamed of yourself. I'll be recommending your competitor as much as humanly possible to my patients who fill prescriptions in this town for the rest of my natural life. Dr. XYZ." The next 40 were identical letters, each with a different staff member, listed as my genius cashier has snagged an old schedule with first names and last initials. The rest had a blank space for me to fill in new hire names so our staff could have all the drinks on the sales floor. My boss was not even mad, none of the higher-ups above him ever mentioned it on a store walk, so I assume it was covered in a meeting of people higher up than me. And yeah, ripe stars, I gotta say, props to that cashier and OP, they are absolute legends. But honestly, I'm so happy that I don't have to work in an environment like this. Absolutely toxic. Either way, the next one is an Am I the A-hole story. Am I the a-hole for not eating with my wife? So I'm sitting here half annoyed, half confused how to feel. Here's my situation. My wife did not work today, she's been hanging with the kids all day. I got home from work at 5:30 and did a turn and burn to jiu-jitsu class. Dinner was not discussed, but since I was getting home at 8:30 I assumed I was on my own for dinner. I get back at 8:30 absolutely starving and exhausted. I'd been planning my dinner all day. Poor man's sushi, it's just canned tuna, rice wrapped in seaweed. I write down everything I eat in a food log and had planned this dinner in advance. I had the exact amount of rice and only 2 sheets of seaweed. I get home and my wife and kids are in the bathroom, taking a bath, so I get to work on my sushi. I have the entire thing written down and I'm ready to feast. I'm giddy with excitement sitting down at the table. All of a sudden, my wife comes out and into the kitchen and says, "Can I have half of that? Me and the kids went out for a late lunch and I haven't eaten." I pause, obviously not happy with this news. I don't want to share, but I also acknowledge that hogging down all the food would be selfish. So she notices the pause and goes, "Fine, I guess, I'll just figure something out," in a pissy tone. I go, no, we can split it, and I give her half. I go on to explain my situation, but I don't think she cared. She was annoyed that I even paused. Now I only had half my dinner and I'm still hungry. I cannot imagine asking for half of someone's food as they are just sitting down to eat. But I also cannot imagine not sharing it. I cannot decide how to feel, that's the story. So, ripe stars, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Do you feel like OP is the a-hole or not? Comment number 1 said, "You are the a-hole. Not for the food thing, everyone sucks here. Both people have a right to feel annoyed at that situation and I hope you work out shared responsibilities for food in the household if needed. However, what the heck did the kids have for dinner? But back to my point, you're the a-hole for talking about her day like spending it with the kids is just leisure time. It sounds like she was kept just as busy as you and you only got a break in her day after giving the kids a bath. She sounded desperate and likely needed that food just as much as you did. I hope you can try to see the situation from her perspective." Comment number 2, "Everyone sucks here. You're a family with kids and should be communicating about who's responsible for dinner so that this sort of thing doesn't happen." Comment number 3, "You're the a-hole. How do you have children with this woman and not have learned to communicate or have a plan in place for days like this?" I'm assuming this nearly 3-hour-long class is not a spur-of-the-minute thing. If it's weekly or monthly or whatever, how is there not an SOP between you and your wife for how dinner is handled those nights? You have a food journal where you write down every meal in advance, but you cannot make a plan with your wife? In lieu of a plan, how about even an ounce of communication? "Hey wife, since I have class until 8:30, should I assume I'm on my own for dinner or do I need to pick something up for the family?" How about a text earlier in the day saying that you're looking forward to this solo meal? You could just say, "Hey honey, I just got home and making my sushi. Did you have dinner? Or can I make you something too since you're bathing our children?" Also, at no point do you mention speaking to your wife until she approached you in the kitchen. Dude, talk to your wife. And yeah, ripe stars, I feel like that's the crux with a lot of these Am I the a-hole stories. A lot of these situations could simply be resolved if people just talk to each other. but it seems like communication problems are really one of the biggest things in relationships. And yeah guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. And also check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on Spotify, Amazon, Audible and other podcast platforms. You will often find exclusive episodes and early access to new content. Furthermore, please check out my Patreon by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or my YouTube membership program for even more exclusive stories. Thank you so much and I will see you again tomorrow.